Okay, so this is my presentation on the evolution of slang, and more specifically, I'll be talking about how we went from olden slang like chuckaboo in the Victorian era to what we use nowadays. Until a couple days ago, I didn't really know much about this topic, but I was really fascinated about etymology and anthropology. This mainly started from an episode from a series I was watching called Other Words. But before we dive in, let's get on the same page about what slang actually is. So what is slang? Before the inception of social media, it was primarily a spoken tongue. Slang doesn't really serve a syntactical purpose, it's more about expressing identity. Slang is used to express the various attitudes of various groups or subcultures that use them. In other words, it's a way of saying, hey, I'm part of your community and I understand you. An example of this would be gamer lingo like poggers or crits. What you can see from most of these words is that slang can appear as a brand new word, a brand new meaning for an existing word, an abbreviation for a word, or a word that becomes more generalized than its former narrow meaning. Slang can also be used to discuss taboo topics in a lighter, more discreet way, which is actually how slang started. Enter cant, an underworld language in 17th century Britain. See, robbers needed a way of communication with one another while leaving their victims in the dark about the crimes they're about to commit. Even the word slang is a slang for slanging the gentry more drummily with a sham kinchin, which refers to a criminal scheme in which a woman pretends to be pregnant, meaning sham kinchin, kinchin meaning child, and about to go into labor in order to gain access to the house of a sympathetic, well-off woman known as the gentry mort, with the intention of robbing her. All right, with that being said, let's play a quick game. What word do you think would be a good word to use to call someone dim-witted back then? Well, if you guessed any of these options, you'd technically be right. So yeah, this was the language of cants, and it was later documented in the Dictionary of Cants, which listed every slang term used by the thieves, creating the first evidence of slang terms being used, which isn't so great for the thieves because their language got leaked, but it's great for us historians. Moving on, let's fast forward from the 17th century, moving past terms like afternoonified and goobers to today's slang, and what terms we use today. To prove my point, I'm going to be using good old grandma. Oh, look, there she is. Let's see what she has to say. Oh, um, okay. So what we just saw, was a scenario that is cringe. But why is it cringe? Well, let me explain. As I mentioned before, slang comes from group identity, but when that identity becomes too mainstream too quickly, the slang term starts to die out because it loses its original meaning. A great example of this would be the term YOLO, which was first coined in 2011, and you can see a big spike in the middle when it starts to become more mainstream, but then it starts to die out in popularity. Another thing that matters is context. Just knowing the term doesn't mean you're necessarily a part of that community. You need to know when and where to use it. Slang is typically used in social groups or in formal settings, but never really in essays or formal contexts. So when somebody like mum starts to use slang, it starts to seem a little bit out of place and, well, cringe. One last point that I have to give is that slang brings a sense of safety. Take, for example, the term a friend of Dorothy. It originated in mid 1900s as a discreet way for LGBTQ plus individuals to identify themselves and connect with others during a time where being a part of this community would lead to facing persecution. Slang not only brought community, but a sense of safety sometimes to them. When people use slang terms that they don't need to, for that reason, it seems a little bit cringe. This is especially true for more specific examples like corporate bodies, like brands, trying to stick in with the cool kids. Any smart consumer would understand that they're simply trying to capitalize on our identities by chasing clout like this. So, if we sum up everything that I've said so far, We know that slang is a register of communication that serves a social function. It solidifies our identities and memberships to our community. It gives us a sense of safety, and once again, community, which is one of the most important aspects about slang. And yeah, that's all I have for this presentation, and thank you for listening to my random monologue.